Well, I want to welcome everybody to another installment of Unraveling Religion. And it's my honor today to be with Rich Grego. Rich, I'm just wondering, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I depending on what would be of interest to your constituency, I guess I'm a professor of philosophy and cultural history. I'm pretty much retired now, but I still teach courses in philosophy and cultural history for Florida State College and then a few other institutions. And that's where I research and publish in the areas of sort of metaphysics and philosophy of mind and consciousness, as well as comparative philosophy of science and religion and themes related to those things. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
What is that in relation to the mystical? How do you relate that to the mystical?
I guess, in academic philosophy, academic studies generally, you can avoid, and they're very good at it, avoid dealing with the mystical at all if you want. But that's really, I guess what they would call the mystical. In the academic world, they use that as a pejorative term, don't they? It's something sort of abnormal, quasi-normal, or, something that only weird people have. But that's one of my areas of interest. And to me, that's where if you want to explore consciousness, where it's really at and religious experience in relation to science and culture, that's really, I think maybe I'd like to hear what you think about that. Its most important contribution to our experience collectively is that it awakens us to deeper and wider modes of experience that this, commercial culture that we've created doesn't allow us to go. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'm curious to hear what your perceptions of what separates us from that direct perception of reality or that direct perception of consciousness.
Well, I guess, and this is coming from, too, a lot of the people I've heard speaking with you on your show, as well as my own research and writing and thinking about this. I think one of the things that does is the society that we're a part of and the culture that we're a part of, as I just sort of alluded to. I think where we're at culturally does not give us a lot of space as beings to explore that dimension of who we are. I mean, it just doesn't. I mean, even if it's not deliberately disparaged, say when you're in school or when you're at work or even when you're out in public, most people don't have time for it because they're too busy with the mindless, empty distractions that the culture sort of forces on them.
The economics of our reality and our culture, the economics, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, so interesting. So I know we had shared this. We'd shared a love of Rumi, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that quote: "Gamble everything for love if you're a true human being. If not, leave this gathering. Half-heartedness does not reach into majesty."
That sums it up, doesn't it? And I guess our participation in the world we live in requires a kind of half-heartedness. It certainly does in the academic world.
Yeah, like a splitness. It's almost encouraged, right? Compartmentalization.
Yeah, compartmentalization and fear of talking or thinking or expressing ideas that aren't considered acceptable in very narrow parameters of what's considered normal. Yeah, so I think but we live in a society that seems to celebrate that kind of thinking. A lot of people anyway, love Rumi and love what he has to say, and I bet most people in the academic world read that poem and are very inspired. But boy, when they get into you go to a conference and you want to be a Rumi, forget about it.
Yeah.
even worse, right, in the working world. I mean, you don't want to discover any higher dimensions of consciousness when you're working as a server on the McDonald's drive-through, right? And they don't want you.
It's tough. What drew you in your interest to the higher levels of consciousness?
Probably like you. I mean, I don't know, but what else? What else is there that's important, right?
Right. Yeah. It seems like were there formative experiences or insights that you had, or was it reading certain authors, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I could point to a really great, anecdotal epiphany that I had that would make a great story, but I can't. I think I've always sort of been on this path. I remember I went to and it was a while ago, my first high school reunion, and everybody was getting together, 10 years after everybody's talking about what they were doing, and a lot of people were really surprised at where people had wound up. And I thought I was going to surprise everybody. I said, I went to college. I'm a philosophy professor now. And everybody was like, yeah, figures, So I guess I've always been kind of there, on that, in a sense, on that path with my mind on that, occupied with that kind of thing. And as life has gone on, it's only for me, especially the older the more chronologically challenged I get in terms of age, the more important I guess it gets to me, because I'm considering my mortality and seeing people and losing people, I think has a lot to do with it, right? I mean, realizing mortality is this maybe the central, I don't know what spiritual issue that confronts us personally, I guess.
What happens after this, right? I mean, what happens after this?
Yeah. How about you? I really am curious. Joel.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, for me, I think, I was just talking with a friend the other day, and he was talking about how he's our age, and he really feels like he's barreling towards death. Like that's the insight that he had. He's our age, and so he's living out of his car, traveling around by choice, and he has in his heart. He's taught me so much. He says he only has so many heartbeats to give.
Wow.
Where does he want to invest those heartbeats? And it's not trading his time for some economic paycheck. So he's really taught me a lot about that, and want versus need. Like, I think he got into this because he wanted to, and he's beginning to discover that he really needed to.
Yeah.
He really needed to travel. He really needed to be untethered. He really needed to be exploring, like, I think of Gandhi and my experiment with truth, like just the test it and see, like, does this work or not? Like, it's kind of fascinating, right? I mean, yeah.
He says, I only have so many heartbeats to give. It sounds like a line from Rumi, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And that, they say there's a tradition, Rich, that says that words from the heart penetrate the heart. In Judaism, they say that. Yeah. And I really feel like, in another vein or another avenue, we take shelter beneath the wings of friendship, right? So, like, when we have deep, authentic, genuine friendship, and we connect from this heart place, it embeds itself in our other friends' heart. And that's what I think he's really done for me, is like, it's a great awakening to live unconventionally in that sense. But, like, he's the most practical, rational, centered person you could meet.
Yeah.
And this is what was offered in our society where he's been led to,
It sounds as though he really needed to break out of the routine mold that commercial society feels that you need to put yourself in order to really connect with these deeper resources he has, I guess. It certainly did for so many of the greats, right? Like, I was just reading an article about Tolstoy and Gandhi, who were, very close correspondents and things like that, and how that issue prompted them to recognize the urgency of living more deeply. But it's tough. It's difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
The question of why is always existential, or it's for the divine. Like why do things happen? But the how do we live more deeply? Like, I don't know. Yeah. How do we live more deeply?
That's my problem. That's what I was hoping to get. That was what I was hoping for you to address to help me. Because seriously, that's one of the problems. And I've talked to our mutual friend we talk about a lot, and who always pushes me to, in terms of having a counseling background like you do, these are great thoughts. How are you going to manifest these in your life? And and that to me is difficult, is the hard part, because I don't know. I don't know how to live authentically, or maybe I am. It's just sometimes I wonder. I read Krishnamurti is one of my go-to guys.
I love Krishnamurti.
Yeah, and I've again, he's a guy I've studied and written a little bit about, and one of the things he always said is that if you're living he doesn't use the term enlightenment or anything like that, but if you're living an authentic life, you won't know it, according to him, right? Because it's too spontaneous, too vital. The minute you stand back and reflect and say, okay, now I'm there, you're not there anymore, just by virtue of the fact you did that. You placed yourself removed from it. And that's tough for me, living that authentically and that spontaneously.
I love the term authenticity, living with authenticity and genuinely and congruently. I don't know about this term enlightenment. And when going back to the beginning of the conversation, we sort of spoke about what prevents us from seeing into consciousness. And I don't think it's anything quantifiable. I think it's really the enmeshment in our identity, right? And so if you don't have a crisis come along to shatter that identity, then it's untouched and it remains in place. And then that's what you work with. Because I don't know about you, Rich, but like I feel like things are brought, like circumstances, events, people, they're brought to us, right? Yeah. So like if your identity has not been crushed or shattered or questioned in a deep way, there isn't a need for that until it happens. You know what I mean?
And I think that really makes a great deal of sense. That this article I was reading about Tolstoy was the Russian author, and sort of, I guess he's considered an existentialist philosopher as well. His epiphany came when he became so despairing of life and so exhausted by the search for answers that by their very nature, I guess by the very nature of a search for answers, you remove yourself from the finding of them, finally just literally wanted to die. Maybe that was the kind of crisis, I guess, maybe you're talking about, because that's essentially what he was describing. He sort of, there's this complete loss of purpose and then loss of self-identity, which is connected, I suppose. And then he finally had this sense of where he stood in the universe. So that gave him peace. I don't know, and I don't know what that peace consists of, or what it's like, because I don't know if I'm enlightened. I don't know if I'm authentic or enlightened or whatever term you want to use, but that's what it took for him. And maybe I've never had the courage to face that.
You're a profound teacher. You're a very effective teacher. Okay. So like, in the Bhagavad Gita, they talk about how, what is your dharma? What is your work? To teach is, a good teacher is only a very good student. really. I mean,
very true. Yeah.
So oftentimes I think many of us are fulfilling our dharma, not knowing that we fulfill our dharma, you know. For me, Rich, I'm often like, what else do I need to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I get that. And I guess sort of that's what Krishnamurti sort of to get back to that point was sort of saying, if you're enlightened, you're not going to know it. And the minute you stand back and try and figure it out, you're going to separate yourself from that state. Maybe enlightenment's a bad term, but so I don't know. I guess what I'm looking for, Heidegger, the philosopher, was always talking about using this term, talked about being at home in the world. Feeling at home.
Yeah.
I love that expression. I really do. Because logistically and sort of spiritually, that sense of at homeness is something that really, I don't know, it resonates with me, that concept. And I'm waiting to really feel that way, I guess. And that to me, I feel it will maybe mean that I've attained something like the state that Tolstoy did finally, and Gandhi. Do you think you're there? Do you feel at home in the world?
I have come to find a place where I am at home in the world. Yeah. Yeah. And I can tell you that it came through great struggle. I had some traumatic experiences growing up, like through my high school years, which led to this, what I refer to as a koan. The universe brought me a koan, which is, what is the matter with me? And so I would question myself very deeply, like, what is the matter with me? What is the matter with me? Intensely for over the course of years. And I think in different ways, insights came. The center of the universe is exactly where you sit. The center of the universe is exactly where you are, Rich. And that's what the rabbis say. That's what the rabbis teach. And I feel a resonance, a kinship with that. And I don't think that, I think the most surprising thing about my spiritual journey has been that I thought there would be something that would happen, but it's nothing extra. There's nothing special about it. And it did. It came from like this universe, the universe bringing this koan, what is the matter with me?
Fascinating. And interesting when you say that, when you said that about the koan, and the way you describe your sense of existence afterwards, it reminded me of this. Before I was enlightened, mountains were just mountains, and rivers were just, I don't know if you've heard this one, and rivers were just rivers. And then when I became enlightened, I'm probably just murdering this saying, but when I became enlightened, or then when I was becoming enlightened, mountains were no longer mountains, rivers were no longer rivers. And now that I'm enlightened, mountains are again mountains and rivers are again rivers. And then another one was a one that I really liked, that it's always stuck with me. A Buddhist monk told me this, as a matter of fact, was speaking in a class. He said, sitting quietly, it was a poem, sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes and the grass grows by itself. Sounds like it could be a Taoist expression too, right? Is that the kind of thing you're talking about? How things don't change and yet you receive them in a new way? Is that
like my relation to things has changed because there's a subtle shift in the understanding about, I guess you'd call it, it's not really an accurate term, but the backdrop of all this. The backdrop of all this, it's all as it should be, as it is. Yeah. And so, but for me, there was a lot of struggle and searching, uncertainty, anxiety, pain, suffering. And to a degree, I still have some of those things, but there's more a confidence that things are, it's a confidence in our original nature, as Shunryu Suzuki says from Zen Beginner's Mind. Yeah. What the point he emphasizes is a strong confidence in our original nature.
Yeah. So you're more at peace. Are you more at peace with mortality? with finitude, with death, with losing things that you love and people? Or is that?
Yeah, I don't worry so much about it. Like, I know that, I have a deep belief in sort of past and future incarnations. And so, and we do this incarnation after incarnation, right? Like, so it's like,
yeah.
So nothing's lost. Nothing's ever lost. And really the thing that the one element that binds us, that, and I think it's love that binds us in karmic affinity, so that the true, genuine, deep, congruent expressions of friendship and love and relationship find themselves again in future incarnations as they have in past incarnations. So you can talk about things in terms of soul family.
Yeah. I mean, everything you say, it speaks with absolutely definitively to where I think I'm coming from, or where I want to be going spiritually, put it that way. And yet you seem to be more confident where you are with it. So I'm wondering why that is. What is it different about your experience than mine that has gotten you there? Maybe it's the suffering. I mean, maybe everything you say is what I want to believe in. And in my heart of hearts, I sense that's the way existence is. But I still, then I doubt it. And I think I buy into the picture that commercial culture has given us, right? We live in a pointless, meaningless, mechanistic world where we're just, higher order amoeba basically, and we're gonna, and our existence is pointless, and we just, go around looking for things to consume for a brief period of time, and then we're gone forever, and it didn't matter anyway. And then thinking, well, maybe they're just right. I don't know. So what is it that got you there in a way that, I don't know, that assures you that this is true, I guess?
If I had to isolate it, I would say fanning the flame of faith grows us in this way, in this direction. And it's a question and matter of the heart. There's nothing quantifiable. There will never be anything quantifiable about shunyata. There'll never be anything quantifiable about the existence of God. There's never going to be anything quantifiable about the existence of spirit world.
Yeah.
That you're not going to find it through the rational search.
So if I'm looking for empirical evidence for this, I'm never going to find it. Yeah.
You're never going to find it.
Yeah.
It's built that way for a reason. Yeah.
What's the reason, you think? I mean, why?
Well, I think that, so it points us back to like living the genuine, congruent from the heart, looking for those genuine, authentic connections of like, what's true, what's real between us, what binds us in love,
Yeah. Fascinating. And then your response to, because you've even had them on your podcast, right? I've heard you've had some secular humanists sort of, so, and you interview them, you're really respectful, and I think you gain a lot from what they have to say. But obviously you're not there. What's your response to that? I mean, what is your response to that? To the secular humanist who says, "Oh, come on, this is fanciful thinking, makes you feel good because you're afraid to face reality, right?" And stuff like that. But where's the evidence for it, or that kind of thing? What's your response to that?
My response is, it doesn't make a shit bit of difference whether you're a deep believer in God or a secular humanist. If you have ethical application of morals and ethics in your daily life, I don't think it makes a shit bit of difference. Mm-hmm. There's no difference.
Really? Well, why?
Well, I mean, that's relationally that's true, but like internally, intrinsically, there's a big difference.
Yeah, see that. Yeah, that's what I mean. When I think that way, I get depressed. When I think like when I'm thinking like you, I'm not. I'm hopeful and happy, and I start to feel at home in the world. So that's, I guess that's, I in a sense, I see what you mean about there not being a difference. But boy, it does seem like you're going to live life in a different spirit, depending on what belief system you adopt in that regard, no?
Yeah. I mean, I can't answer. I don't know why certain people have seeds of faith and other people seem to manifest tremendous ethic without a notion of a karma or a backdrop of justice.
And they certainly seem to be very spiritual. So many of them are deeply spiritual as well, aren't they?
Brilliant, sensitive, deeply spiritual, lacking nothing essentially except for a difference in perspective.
That's true. That's true. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you're right. Maybe it doesn't matter.
I mean, but for me, like, there's a certain fulfillment, I think, as a human being. There's a fulfillment that I have that I feel.
That makes sense.
But back to you, Rich. Like, what are some of your may I ask, like, some of your major influences, like Krishnamurti and
Krishnamurti and Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Buddhist monk and philosopher, and Martin Luther King nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize. He was from Vietnam. Just for anybody who's not familiar with him, he's pretty well known, though. They were the subject of my doctoral dissertation. So intellectually, and again, my intellectual and spiritual influences, I mean, I can't really separate them. For me, that's why I pursued this path. So those two guys, I mean, those two thinkers are among my really profound influences. Gosh, I don't know. There's so many, right? Gandhi and Confucius and Plato, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wow.
So there you go. I guess those guys. I mean, it's hard to. It's like asking a music theory professor who their favorite musicians are, or whatever, who their most profound musical influences are. I guess there are a lot.
Those are very. They share a lot of spiritual qualities, but divergent in some ways.
Absolutely,
seriously divergent in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. Which is why one of the points of the book, it's sort of a work in comparative philosophy and sort of almost comparative intellectual history, because we're trying to look at the legacies of these thinkers on a particular theme. And you're right. What I find interesting, though, is, and I find myself doing this, is looking at the commonalities that they share, right? I think those three guys, as utterly diverse, right, as the historical and cultural circumstances they came from were, and the philosophical traditions that Confucius and Plato inaugurated great philosophical traditions, and Gandhi was inheriting one, was a great figure in it. As different as they were, some to me, and again, this is for me, that some essential beliefs about the nature of existence that they shared give me hope, again, that there is some sort of, and I think feed into my own sense of what's ultimately at work in the world. That's the right expression for it. So I find those kind of endeavors really interesting. And how about you? I mean, do you have any particular?
Rumi, Matheson's The Snow Leopard.
Really?
It just blew the doors and windows out of my mind. And
I'm interested because I've never read it. I've heard of it. I should read it.
It's funny. I have the opening quote from Rilke.
Oh, really?
Which is, it goes like this. That is at bottom the only courage that is demanded of us, to have courage for the most strange, the most singular, and the most inexplicable that we may encounter. That mankind has in this sense been cowardly, he has done life endless harm. The experiences that are called, quote unquote, visions, the whole so-called, quote unquote, spirit world, death, all those things that are so closely akin to us have been daily been so crowded out of life, to the senses to which we could grasp them have been atrophied, to say nothing of God.
That's excellent. Boy, that's true, isn't it? Kind of speaks, in a sense, except he was a hell of a lot more eloquent than me, to what I was sort of trying to allude to in the very beginning of our conversation about the nature of our, I mean, in a sense, it's even deeper than culture. Maybe it's something intrinsic to the human condition that makes us,
I think so,
afraid of who we really are, right? And it manifests itself in culture. And our culture is particularly good at manifesting it, I think. It gives people lots of opportunities to hide from who they really are and face those great spiritual undertakings and challenges. And that I'm interested in, think that it's something intrinsic to the human condition, from the deeper sense of who we are.
I believe in separation of the body and soul. I believe that we are a soul. I believe that there are realms that are unseen. I believe we can access non-ordinary states of consciousness. And, but again, when you delve deeply into your heart, you will see it. But if you get into your mind, you'll lose it.
Yeah.
That's been my direct experience. That's been my direct experience.
No, I guess that speaks directly to what Krishnamurti was saying, that if you're there, you don't know it. And the minute you try to reflect on it and analyze, or at least sort of analyze it, right, and give yourself a critical intellectual distance from it, you lose it. I mean, I guess that's what he was saying and what you're saying, right? And I mean, there is that sense, I know, in Zen, they say it again and again and again, that it's the very process of trying to attain enlightenment, or one of the things, the very process of trying to attain enlightenment that separates you from enlightenment. Turning the enlightenment into an object of desire is exactly what keeps you from attaining that desire, right?
Dropping all expectation, I think, is a vital matter. And it's why I loved, because just for the audience, I was like, Rich, do you want a list of questions? And he's like, no, let's just go. So, well, I think
if I was going to do an interview, I'd plan for it. I'd have tons of questions listed in advance and want to proceed methodologically to demonstrate a point. And again, I think that's a lot of the conditioning that poisons the mind in the academic world. But without being a spiritual tourist, you seem like a person who really draws on many, at least I gather that from your interviews and your writings, you draw from a lot of traditions, which I do too as well. But I feel more like a spiritual tourist sometimes because I'm interested in them. And to some extent, I practice them in terms of I meditate every day and the techniques, if you want to call them that I use, are things that I've garnered from many different traditions. Really, but I can't say I've ever followed a path. I've never, followed a Zen path or a Hindu path or even a Christian path or Judeo or any of that or anything like that. So you get all these other faiths, but you're also you sense where your spiritual roots are in terms of specific traditions as well.
I feel that that's true. Yeah. I have, with my Jewish upbringing, I feel an affinity with that. And, in this incarnation, I found Zen and I feel an affinity with that. And
Yeah. I wish I had, I think maybe that's important. Spiritually, maybe and ethnically as well. I've often thought about that. When you come from sort of a, despite my sort of Italian last name, I come from a pretty waspy sort of a family, pretty middle American waspy culture. And I sometimes envy people who have an ethnic tradition. As much as you suffer for it in our society, God knows, unless your ethnic tradition happens to be white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. But if you have another tribe, I think it gives you a certain base to draw from in life. Spiritually and morally, that if you've sort of been, if you've never been raised with one in particular, you don't really have. I don't know, but my guess would be that you're having a Jewish heritage has probably been a great gift for you in many ways.
It has been, yeah. It's an anchor for me, yeah.
I was raised in a liberal Protestant sort of tradition, which means basically nothing, right? You go to church because you're supposed to, and it's respectable, and they teach some sort of milquetoast version of Christ's life and message, and you're open, just sort of generally open-minded about everything. I think that's a great gift in a lot of ways, but it also doesn't give you a really rich spiritual ground to draw from that I would think you'd have if you were raised in something like a Jewish tradition. Am I wrong?
A source of like comfort, you know?
Yeah.
But I have also found, Rich, that there's the mystical element of Christianity, which is deep and fascinating. Yeah. You know, the mystical element of Christianity is...
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, absolutely. You don't get a lot of that in the liberal Protestant tradition, right? If you're going to the Methodist church or the Presbyterian church, you know, they do not delve into mysticism. You do in a lot of churches. And again, like I said, but they're ethnic churches, right? The African-American church, right? That's a very rich source of profound spirituality and social justice and, great, ethical thought and things like that. But so I agree with you, and certainly Greek Orthodox tradition, and there's so many, right? There are just so many Christian spiritual traditions as well that do have that notion, but they're not what you'd call mainline churches. So that I think maybe you miss out on. That's one thing I think you maybe miss out on if you've been raised in a Protestant sort of mainline church culture. But then again, I was just reading doing some research, and I was reading some Pew Report studies on the trajectory of conventional religion in the Western world, and even in the United States, which is probably the most religious country in the industrialized, post-industrial world. And there aren't many people in conventional churches anymore. So maybe that's not a problem that we're going to have very much longer. I don't know.
I hope not, because I hope that there's a translation or a transference from the external manifestation of honoring spirituality and community to making it a deeply personal, something that need not even be spoken about in a Taoist sense,
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's the same thing. I mean, it's cross-cultural. It's the same thing. Dogen says there are many languages but one tongue.
Yeah. Do you think, and the Vedas, right? The famous truth is one, but people call it many names, right?
Yeah.
Along those lines, I am curious. If we were going to talk, I was going to write my book about the philosophy of Joel. And your metaphysics, so to speak, I sense in your thought that you believe in that there is some sort of ultimate unified ground of existence that emanates everything, that all the multiplicity of what we see and do and experience, and maybe the source of human, again, I'm projecting a lot on you, so tell me if this is wrong. And that maybe the sense in which human beings become fallen in the religious sense of that term, spiritual sense of that term, is that we become so caught up in these manifestations, we forget about the ground or the source that they come from, and feel separate and feel isolated and alienated and lonely, and that the reconnecting energy to that would be love, because that's where it all comes from ultimately in the beginning. Now, is that fair to where you're coming from? Is that close to you at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is all.
I think that's the essence of the great traditions that I really love myself. Would I read your stuff and everything? Would that be accurate? Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I feel that this is a unified experience, that you and I are same self in different center points. You and your incarnation, you and your body, me and mine.
Yeah.
And I feel like we are broken off from the one source or God, it gave of itself you there and me here. Yeah. For us to be free to choose, you know, in that freedom of infinite choice and possibility, but it is also all known, you know, that there's no discord between predetermination and free will, that, you know, from the vantage point of God, that it all is known, because when you love something, you know it, and it loves us and it knows us.
Yeah. That sounds like exactly what I was saying. So you and I agree completely. That's a good thing. I mean, I think our metaphysics and theology is 100% synonymous. It sounds that way anyway. So we have nothing left to talk about, I guess.
But I'll tell you, you really resonate to me as someone who would follow a Hindu Buddhist path. Like, I really, you feel like you have like a deep affinity with it, you know?
Definitely. Yeah, I certainly do. Yeah. But I, like you said, there's a lot about them that speak, I think, in many ways. It's kind of like you said, I think that Judaism, the Abrahamic faiths and Islam, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, ultimately are about the same thing, which you seem to agree with. Something about the way some of the Asian traditions, right, the dharmic sort of traditions, I guess they call them, something about the way those traditions speak to the same thing that Christianity and Judaism are talking about, and the way they go about speaking it really resonates with me, I guess. Maybe it's I don't know what the hell. Maybe what do you think? I mean, obviously, you feel the same way, right? I came from a Christian tradition, and I sort of I discovered Asian traditions, and it helped me understand my Christian tradition in a much more deep and abiding way. And it almost sense the same thing may have happened with you.
So much so, yeah. They say that Zen is the religion before religion, because it's not any kind of words, it just is the practice of meditation.
Yeah. Maybe that's it. It's the Asian traditions, whether it's Taoism or the many Buddhisms, right? Or Taoism or many of the Buddhist traditions and their different incarnations, and many of the Hindu traditions as well. The emphasis they have on practice, and on the experiential realization of the ideologies that they talk about, right? The ideologies almost come second. Zen is really that way, right? Hinduism, right, gets a lot more metaphysical, but ultimately, right, they're all about what you're experiencing, as opposed to what you profess to believe, which is there's a big emphasis on in the Judeo-Christian traditions, right?
Yeah, I think that's
what was it that attracted you.
It's the fundamental crux of it is the realization of yourself, the realization of really what you are, is the fundamental shift in the Eastern versus Western manifestations of spirituality and religion. That in the East, the direct realization of your deepest self shifts everything, where beliefs can change things, but they don't shift the phenomenology. They don't shift the deep experience of our human being.
Yeah. And then I get, once again, maybe that gets back to this dichotomy we've been talking about of experiencing authenticity, enlightenment, whatever it is, and reflecting on that or theorizing about it, and how the latter can separate you from the former. I think that, the Asian traditions are very the ones that I like and that you do, I think, are very mindful of that. So maybe that's the crux of it.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for today? Like, this has been a wonderful conversation, brother.
Thanks so much. Yeah, for me too. No, it's been great. I want you to tell me the meaning of life. That's why I want. I was relying on that, seriously. My whole quest as a philosopher, honestly, I'm like Socrates, I guess. I really am the guy who knows nothing, and I'm just looking for wisdom. And salvation, redemption, spiritual redemption, wherever I can find it. And I'm getting increasingly desperate as life goes on because I don't think I've found it yet. If you have any advice for a seeker like me, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I can only share with you what the rabbis say, which is the highest form of wisdom is kindness. Right? Like, in every moment is an opportunity to express that.
Yeah. And in expressing that, do you find that you reconnect with the ground of a deeper ground of your being?
Yeah, it's funny in the ways that we first talked about not knowing that you do.
Yeah.
But, like in Judaism, they talk about like a mitzvah, a good deed connects us to the divine. Like the good feeling connects us to the divine. Deep exploration has its place, but also, the sharing of a coin is the same thing. It's like.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I can see, and whenever I've done that, I have felt more at home in the world.
Yeah.
So inspired by you, I'm going to go out and do something nice for somebody when this is over.
Oh, I'll do the same. Let's see if we
enough.
can't transform this place. Yeah.
Excellent. Really. Thank you.
Yeah.